Hey there, Cosmos. How y'all doing this morning? She isn't up quite yet. We've got some cloudy skies here on planet Earth. Because information runs through the mind of the vortex so fast with me, if I don't write some of these things down, trying to connect the dots to reach what I call critical mass awareness, which simply means, when you think about it, maybe this is the way that I'll sort of do this. When I was a child growing up, I think it was in 8th grade, they used to have what was called the Iowa State exams. And there's a reason why they do these exams, because they use that information to sort of, again, remember everything is a measurement, a scalar measurement. They're measuring the state of consciousness. And of course, when I was doing this as a child, I think I mentioned in a previous video about how we can measure the difference on a scale between light, dark energy, light energy, the singularity. Are you in a state of peace between both sides of the loop, the minus slash the plus? How fast you going, how slow you going, how much light are you attracting, how much light are you losing? And that becomes, right, a measurement. Remember, we carry a ruler everywhere we go. It's built in. I call it a built-in looking glass. And I covered that in previous videos. So one of the things that I didn't cover, and I briefly touched on it, was the other night there was and naturally these are not coincidences. Okay, when you think of an event and an event on a timeline horizon, and you think of the speed in which you're experiencing the event in space-time, or the space in which you're experiencing it gets into the wave, the speed of the wave, within a given space. Okay, and that gets into hyperspace. That's a different video. But what I wanted to cover here is what I call dependency, okay, versus independency. Okay, dependent versus independent. We can translate that as newborn children, right? The newborn child is dependent on who? A caregiver. My dad used to ask me when I was a young teenager, "Are you your brother's keeper?" And I go, "Well, hey, Pop, yeah, no." "What do you mean, yeah, no?" I said, "Well, on the one hand, I have a responsibility based on my coursework of what I'm learning how to go faster, because if I do that, I'm gaining more electrons to power the quanta, and that allows me to be a natural energy giver because I keep getting more of what it is that I am that I'm attracting. So I'm giving away energy for free. So in that regard, I'm giving everybody away energy. Is that being a keeper? No, that's being a lighthouse, just like the sun is. That's free energy." "Wow, you learned how to be a sun, huh?" "Yeah, go look, what is it doing? It's free energy." That's why the very idea that they sell us back what it is that we are, that's insane. So those are the carnival barkers. Remember one of the first videos I put up? They present to us, essentially, who they are. Well, I'm not what you are, okay? That's fear-based. Fear-based dependency. The child recognizes by the level of its intelligence and logic, left side, right? And the mind of its heart, in my case, hey, I got all the energy I need. I'm in a state of love and joy. And that's your core frequency vibrations based on your coursework. It means that whenever you started out in the cosmos, you learned along the way how energy works. So you sort of chose your energy niche by the energy that you love to experience. So in my case, I love to be around living magma. Where you have a relationship in spirit with the most powerful energy, creation energy. Because as soon as that rock cools, what's going to happen? You already got a picture in your head, right? Stuff starts to grow. Next thing you know, you got birds and other creatures, right, that are in nature. Okay, so this is where we get into mass density consciousness. Okay, so there was an episode on Fox News, Tucker Carlson show a few days ago, and they had a guy by the name of Mike Rowan. I believe he's an educator. I don't know what university he's attached to. Remember attachments? Remember I covered attachments? The importance of independency? I'm not attached to that. So if you're using your state of consciousness to attach yourself to something that is mass density, then whatever mass or weight that density represents is what you're holding on to, okay, as an attachment. I don't like to be attached to anything. 0 point. Okay? 0 attachments. That allows my consciousness to be free of all attachments. So therefore, I'm not dependent on a mass density attachment. I wish I had the picture to show everybody, but it shows the guy in the window. Remember, I had the 2 windows where the guy's looking at the flower, and you can see little red hearts. Oh, I love the flower. And then you see in the next window, mine. I want the flower. The flower's mine. That's mass density. That's heavier mass density. You can't let go of it. I gotta have it. It's mine. That's the nature of control. Of what it can't love unconditionally, just in a free state. Which means the flower is free to be what a flower is, and the flower is presenting itself to us just as a flower is. I don't want to take away from the flower to be exactly what it is in its natural state. Hey, you're beautiful. So I go over and kiss the flower and say, thank you for presenting yourself to me. I love you too. And walk on. So you realize your state of consciousness, sort of in an observer mode, is not dependent on the attachment that you have to have it. Oh, I've got to have it. I don't want to get into all the conversations of cutting stems, putting them in water, because we want to keep them in that state as long as we can to bring flowers into the house. And hey, this is it's trying to bring nature inside of a house that's made out of cutting down living trees so that you produce dead wood that we live in, right? So you can translate that, as I mentioned in a previous video, the difference between, if you will, how Native Indians, if you will, live in the trees, which they called us a savage, which means lives in the trees, versus, for example, living in dead wood boxes that are wired up for very particular reasons, and everything that they sell us through their corporations is meant essentially to degrade the energy, toxify what it is that we are, so that we have to spend energy in order to detoxify ourselves instead of purifying ourselves by all the junk they throw at us. And if you're not aware of how the input and the output side relate to that, simply start collecting data on the health of the biosphere, and you begin to realize the communication relationship between who we are and who the great living spirit of Mother Earth is, that is running the physics, if you will, to provide the biosphere for everybody to come into. So when you think of having parasites in your body that you can see by looking at your eyes in the mirror, you can also measure the level of parasites that exist within her own energy field, the same way that we have colonies, parasitic colonies in the colon, colonies of parasites in our colon that can be seen through the yellow in our eyes. So when you realize that you're a goddess, for example, in which there are a lot of parasites that are building tunnel networks in her energy field that do demonic things, she begins to realize, I got a lot of demons in my energy field. That's no different than if you, as a Homo sentient sapien, have parasites in your colon and you're experiencing something that is communicating with you internally to say, feed me. Feeds on your life. Now you got to detoxify yourself to get the speed up of the waveform communication in which you're purifying your body. I'm sort of going off on a different track here because I am limited for time on my videos because of the memory on the phone, because I'm getting rid of all the attachments in my life to get essentially back down to just being consciousness and spirit, if you will, which is how you come in here, okay, into a physical unit as a communication platform to share with others the energy that you use to communicate with everything else in the universe, right? This particular universe. So anyway, I wanted to cover Mike Rowan and Tucker Carlson because Mike Rowan talked about, for example, a program that he had with scholarships and money related to what's known as a bioethic, which means how ethical are you? Well, that can be measured by what it is that you do with your energy. So one of the things that he noted, and of course I knew this over time because as both a student and a teacher, you can measure over space-time the equation between the minus and the plus, or the speed at which, when you look at population, the mass density of the population, you have an increase in parasites over time. And how do we know that? Because look at how many beings are now dependent on something else in order to get what it is that they believe in their own mind they need to have in order to be able to survive. So you begin to realize that when you're in survival mode, which is a reptilian mode of surviving, then you're not using the creative imagination of a higher speed wave in which you realize you're never going to lose what it is that you are, which is what love is, because you're going to keep attracting more energy, which means you're not running out of energy, which means you learned how light works. You're no longer dependent on anybody else, and you're free of all the attachments. So what happens is that they ran what I call an inverted program, which means to reverse that. And this is the difference between what fear and what love is, which is the difference between two timelines. One that collapses, unless you keep harvesting more energy off others, which means you're dependent on their energy in order for you to believe that you've got to continue on. So your belief system, okay, that we learned through them, not me, but others did, that in order for you to continue what it is that you're aware of, which is yourself, you need them in order to do that. And that's false. That's an illusion. Okay? That's obvious. All you got to do is look at the sun. And the sun informs you of that truth right away. So they couldn't make that translation. So one of the great teachers that I've known over many, many years is a guy that was a teacher in the New York City school system. He worked in both elite schools and public schools. He wrote a number of books, one of which was very famous, called Dumbing Down America, which, if you want to measure it on a scale, means that the speed at which people are experiencing who they are is tunnel vision. They're simply not aware of more information or more data that informs them of how big their universe is and what's possible to experience out there, because they're experiencing lower density or lower speed. Okay? Now, when you put in all the stuff they throw at everybody through all of their products, whether it's a hair product, a shampoo product, whether it's milk with hormones in it, etc., 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 you begin to realize that you have a relationship with a parasite. Parasitic consciousness. So the only way that parasitic consciousness can maintain a relationship with us is to get us in a parasitic consciousness vibrational mode of lower density, which we believe that we need them in order to continue to be what we are. That means as long as we have a dependent relationship with what we believe is the energy that they provide for us, what if they pull the rug out? Like they did in 1929 in the Depression. That was engineered in order for them to be able to accumulate more energy. When you understand how investment works, I invest in a bunch of stuff, and now as a result of that, as an international banker, all I have to do is pull the rug out, and next thing you know is that I can use the money that I have to buy it all up. And if you look at the history of the Vatican intelligence services, the relationship with the monarchs, and particularly when you look at Rothschild, anybody who knows anything about, for example, what was the name of that battle between Napoleon and Wellington? That was considered to be a critical battle between France and England, and particularly when you look at the silver standard and what was known at the time as the Bank of England. So you see, there was an old saying that they had that Rothschild had a faster horse, which meant that the scout that he was using to find out how the battle was going, he knew, for example, that Napoleon was going to lose. Everybody thought Napoleon was naturally going to win. Well, out of that, because he had information that was known before the British people knew what they knew, which was later, he ended up with the Bank of England. Now he controls the Bank of England. So we're talking about a major vampire here, okay? Which means this is a pure predator that realizes in order for me to make them dependent on me, I have to be the bank that they come to get what it is that they believe that they need, which is money. Okay? Now everybody's dependent on the bank. And that means that you're in a state of risk and a state of fear, because if you run out of money, you believe that you run out of what you are and you die. Remember I talked about a previous video about having after-death experiences? Hey, I'm not the body. But you have to accommodate the body. And accommodating the body, which means providing the necessary energy upon which it operates, is easy to do when you're in nature. But getting people to believe that they can live in nature and be happy living in the trees with everything that is in there and living spirit is an entirely different equation. That doesn't mean that you can't build a civilization, for example, that's highly advanced with teleportation stations, with motherships that you can jump aboard or teleport into and go travel to another universe. Okay? So this is where your creative imagination comes in, and you realize that, my God, how many stories can you write about the universe that you've experienced, right? Going from one galaxy to the next, to the next, to the next. Remember I talked about in a previous video about being storytellers, visual storytellers? Well, here's something else you might want to tie into this, and that's called Secret Weapons and Silent Wars. My dad gave me a copy of that when I was a teenager, and I read through it, and basically what it is schematic. It shows you how the electrical circuit boards and magnetic light work on the planet, but not only that, how they use what's known as social electrical engineering of your consciousness to believe in the things that we do. So essentially what they do is they have the ability to control how the electrons move. Remember how I talked about in a previous video, how the electrons move based on a time clock? And they harvest because these are electrical wars. So if you ever take the time and you've ever had any kind of electrical engineering, you can look at the schematics that are in that particular document, which, as I remember, goes back to like 1938. I believe it was a Harvard study, but it was used as a, what do you call it? Much in the same way that they use white papers or theoretical ways in which they can use this to control what it is we experience. That's basically what it is. They want to control what it is we experience through our consciousness, to be in lower mass density consciousness with a fear-based predator. That's essentially the crux of it. So when you got a relationship with something that's feeding on your light, and you don't want to have a relationship with a predator, then it means you got to be able to get your energy up where your bandwidth channel, which means what you communicate with other beings, is running at a higher speed, which means what you experience, what you are, is the speed at which you're running. And that allows you to burn off all their junk, and you realize that you occupy a higher realm because the speed at which you travel through space and hyperspace is in a place they can't get there because they can't move that fast. They don't vibrate that fast, which means their state of consciousness and what they are in living spirit doesn't experience what we experience. Because love created the cosmos, fear didn't. So when you look at the waveform, the speed, and look at the time-space differences between high-speed waves and long, you begin to realize the difference in the realms that you're experiencing based on the speed contest, remember? So learning how to go at a higher rate of speed is coursework. Learning how to manage your own tack, right? So this is what they essentially did, because I can remember growing up as a child in America, for example, and what it was like to be able to go through most any community. I never had to worry about anything being taken from me. You used to be able to get out of a car, a 57 Chevy or whatever, leave the vehicle running, run in there and get what you need, and you come right back out and your car's still running just the same way you left it. Because nobody is going to take or say to themselves, listen, I need that vehicle of yours, you got a key in it, I'm going to grab it and take off with it. Just like I mentioned the other day in a video where I saw two teenage girls that decided to acquire two bicycles that belonged to somebody else, and they decided, hey, I need a couple of bikes, I'm just going to take it from them. That's a sense of entitlement that what you have belongs to them. Where did that come from? Where did that kind of behavior generate from? Dependency. Breeding parasites. Okay? See, when they control the amount of energy that you believe that you're going to experience, which is through them, and you don't get very much, now you perceive that, hey, listen, I don't have a lot of things. I don't have a lot of money. I'm not a self-generating power station, so therefore what it is I manifest, which means what it is that I'm attracting in my life, okay, in order for me to feel love and joy, instead of that, they believe that everything is based on money and the acquiring of mass density in order for them to have fun. I don't have a bicycle because I don't have any money, because I don't have a job, and I don't have a way to acquire the money by working for somebody to get a bicycle. So therefore, I'll just take it from somebody else who did. That essentially what that boils down to is stealing electricity, stealing energy. And they don't even realize why it is they behave the way that they do, because they have no idea how that works. And that's why when I was in Honolulu, I mentioned in a previous video, I had most everything that I was stolen at least 6 times. Okay? And this is when we get into time, space, and speed. They actually look, what they do, particularly seniors, because they know that seniors work their whole life, Okay, now that they're on Social Security, they target seniors because they know that seniors worked